Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Sports Moles Football Shorts. I'm Barney Corkhill and we're with our football editor Matt Law, and we're here to talk about game week 24 of the Premier League season and our predictions for it. We didn't do too well last week, I've got to say, Matt, but we're back on the horse straight away for this one. And we start with a big game. It's third versus fourth, Leicester versus Liverpool. Obviously, Liverpool coming into it off the back of that 4-1 home defeat against Manchester City last time out. Back-to-back league defeats for the first time ever under Jurgen Klopp. And 3 home defeats in a row, but they're back on the road where they've been a little bit better in recent weeks. But a really tough game against the Leicester side, who sit 3 points above them in the table. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a really tough game, isn't it? Like you mentioned, on paper, you might, arguably look at it and say that's a really tough game, which it is. But the fact you mentioned that Liverpool are getting away from Anfield is probably a good thing for them, which you wouldn't have said for, that long run that went on. But getting away, their last 2 Premier League games on the road, they've been good, haven't they? To be fair, they were good at Tottenham and good at West Ham. 3-1 wins in both of those games, and they'll be looking for a similar thing in this game. But obviously Leicester, where they are in the table, and we were just talking a minute ago, weren't we, about how close Chelsea are to Liverpool now, only a point in it, and think about how far they've come. Chelsea, Liverpool's form's dropped off. Only 3 points behind Leicester though, Liverpool, obviously Leicester third. So if they were to win this game, they'd put themselves in a great position. And Leicester, on the other hand, only 2 points off Manchester United. I think we're probably both in agreement, aren't we? And a lot of people are that City probably will win the league. I think they will win the league. So the battle for second, third, fourth is, going to be really interesting. And they'll obviously, going to this game, be keen to do that. I think the injury situation for Leicester, Vardy's been out, hasn't he? But he's back now. It's interesting to see that he started in the FA Cup, didn't he, against Brighton, which you fancy the fact that he wanted to give him some minutes in that game because he came off the bench, I think, the game before, didn't he? And they've got a couple of injury problems, Leicester. I think we're just talking as well. James Justin's going to be out, and for me, he's been fantastic this season. Fofana's out. Obviously, Evans will come back in from the FA Cup team, but not quite there in terms of putting his best side on the field. But obviously, there'll be changes elsewhere. Maddison will come back in, Harvey Barnes, Evans, Schmeichel. So there'll be a freshen from the FA Cup game. Obviously, they play Manchester United, don't they, in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, which would be interesting. But it's a really big game. It's, there's this interesting thing with Liverpool at the moment. I'll get your opinion on this. I'm thinking about it, the Thiago signing. I think as good as he is, does he suit Liverpool? It's an interesting point, isn't it? Is his style in midfield suited? You're talking about a player that, off the top of my head, you might correct me, I'm talking about the last, really top draw central midfielders Liverpool had, Gerrard, Alonso, maybe. He's probably the first one since then. Liverpool's success has been built on, high energy midfield, isn't it? Not particularly, as good as Henderson is, Wijnaldum. They're not world-class midfielders, are they? So his style, I think, is going to be interesting. Is he a little bit too slow and for what Liverpool are trying to do? That's an interesting point moving forward. But yeah, this is a tough game for Liverpool, tough game for Leicester as well, of course. Obviously, Liverpool will be desperate to bounce back from the heavy defeat to City. Took a bit of a hiding in the end. Obviously, penalty levelled it, didn't he? But then it was a good performance from City and some... I'll let you talk about the Alisson mistakes. They were, incredible, really. But I've actually got a draw here. I think it'll be a tight game. Leicester's absentees probably makes me think that they won't win. Otherwise, I might have gone with them if they were full strength. But 1-1.
Yeah, I've maybe let my heart roll my head with this one, but I've gone for a Liverpool win. I think in recent seasons, we've seen games against Leicester as potentially defining features of the season. There was the 4-0 in the title-winning season at Leicester when Trent Alexander-Arnold had that great game, and everyone was expecting a really tough game there. Earlier this season, Liverpool won this fixture 3-0 at Anfield when, again, Leicester were flying high. So Liverpool have dealt really well with the Leicester threat in recent seasons, and the Leicester threat has been very big in recent seasons, just as big as it is in this game. Obviously, the difference now is that Liverpool themselves are in pretty poor form and they'll have to get over that. But I think the Man City scoreline was a bit harsher than, the game actually played out. First half, there was very little between them. And I think the difference between them was those 2 Alisson errors, which were obviously, dreadful errors and really costly in the end and probably ultimately knocked Liverpool out of the title race once and for all, those 2 errors to gift Man City the victory. Obviously, Alisson saved Liverpool so many times in the past, it's hard to be too upset with him with them. But they were costly errors, there's no getting around that fact. But I think, without those errors, and they were uncharacteristic, they're not going to be happening in most games. They're very rare to happen from Alisson, those ones. Without those, Liverpool would have been right in with the chance of getting something out of that game. I said before that game, I think Liverpool needed a win to stand any chance of going for the title, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting they deserved the win, but they could have got something out of that game without those 2 mistakes. So I think the 4-1 scoreline was a bit harsh on them in the end. And when you look at their other recent defeats, it's come against these teams which have been really difficult to break down, the likes of Brighton and Burnley recently at home, those 1-0. And I don't expect this Leicester game to be similar to that. It'll probably be closer to what the Man City game was like, obviously against a team not quite at the level of Man City, who, as you mentioned, are the best team in the country by a long way at the moment. So I see Liverpool having more joy against Leicester than they perhaps did against the likes of Brighton and Burnley, which is why I'm going for a Liverpool victory in this game. Leicester, of course, do have the players to harm Liverpool, and Liverpool are not in great form at the moment. But as you say, Leicester also missing a few key players, as Liverpool are. And I think the fact, Liverpool away from home, as you mentioned, have been a little bit better. The fact that Liverpool need a victory, really, with Chelsea breathing down their necks, as you alluded to as well. And the fact that Liverpool have had 6 days to prepare for this game, which is a bit of a luxury in recent times, especially compared to Leicester, who have only had 3 days. That should have given the likes of Ozan Kabak a chance to get into training, and I probably expect him to make his debut in this game, which will push Henderson forward into midfield again, which I think is something Liverpool have been lacking. I think there's a few key elements which is sort of leading me towards Liverpool. Again, Leicester have got the quality to beat anyone in the league, as they've shown already this season. Obviously, earlier in the season, they beat Man City pretty comfortably at the Etihad, didn't they? So they've shown they can beat the best in the league this season. So it wouldn't be a huge surprise at all to see Leicester get something out of this game, even go and win the game. But for me, I'm going for Liverpool. On the Thiago point, I'm not really buying into that yet. I've seen it said quite a lot that, he might not really suit the Liverpool style. I think he's joined at a pretty, it's turned out to be a pretty difficult time. Obviously, when he joined, it seemed to be the perfect time to join Liverpool. But since he's joined, obviously, both key centre-backs, but all 3 centre-backs have been injured. He spent a long time out injured. He's getting used to a new league. He's a player of world-class quality, as we've both said on numerous occasions, one of the best midfielders in the world. So I'm pretty sure he'll be able to adapt to Liverpool, and Liverpool will be able to adapt to him. He's got the quality. I don't think he's a bad fit for Liverpool at all. And I think Liverpool at full strength with Thiago in the team are a better team than Liverpool at full strength were last season. I would say probably goes to ground and is a bit rash and is challenging sometimes, but that's something he'll probably learn. That's probably something that's been drilled into him again by Klopp, to win the ball back quickly, and he's taken that maybe a little bit too far at times. But I certainly think he's still a great addition to the Liverpool team. He's just come at what has proven to be a difficult time for them. I'm backing Liverpool to return to winning ways in this one, but it will be a tough game. Certainly an interesting one. I mentioned Burnley very briefly there for their recent win at Liverpool. They play Crystal Palace on Saturday at 3 p.m. Burnley's away form, obviously that recent win at Liverpool aside, and they beat Fulham in the FA Cup aside, but their goal scoring form has been awful. There's 2 goals in their last 9 away games in the Premier League, but those did come against Arsenal and Liverpool, and both are 1-0 victories. So they picked up points in that time. They're now 8 points clear of danger. But got knocked out of the FA Cup in midweek. Crystal Palace lost to Leeds last time out, ending a run of back-to-back wins. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it is a big game, isn't it? Towards the, obviously, Burnley towards the Boston. We're talking about where they are in the table at the moment. Obviously, it's quite surprising, isn't it? You talk about the recent wins they've had. When Liverpool, they're down in 17th now, but that gap is, the bottom 3 are getting cut adrift, aren't they? Now it's 8 points to Fulham. Fulham no game in hand over Burnley. Obviously, Fulham have a game in hand over a lot of teams above them, but not Burnley. And 8 points is a lot when you're talking about Fulham have won twice this season. Obviously, West Brom below that, and Sheffield United have both played 23 games, and they're Burnley are 12 points above Sheffield United. So the fact they are 17th is not great on paper, but I think looking into it a bit deeper, the situation is not really panicky as it might have been. But I think the FA Cup defeat to Bournemouth was, I think I'd be really disappointed. I read, Sean Dyche after the game said, alluded to he wasn't too disappointed because, it wouldn't affect their Premier League form, and the Premier League's more important, which is true. But, I mean, Bournemouth drew Southampton, didn't they, in the quarterfinals? Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great... If Burnley would have won that game, obviously you don't know you're going to draw Southampton, but what an opportunity to reach, a semi-final of the FA Cup. And I still think there was a little bit... The FA Cup is still treated with that. I do understand that because, obviously, the league is more the most important thing for clubs like that. All clubs, really. The league is the bread and butter. But, it'd be an interesting game for, Sean Dyche press conference yesterday. He said he's still got... There's been a few absentees recently for Burnley. He's still not sure. Chris Wood might miss out. Rodriguez might get a start. Jack Cork and Pope look like they're going to be okay. Brownhill and Taylor might come in as well, who have been out recently, have been good players. Obviously, Palace's injury list at the moment is just, I mean, it's never ending, isn't it? The players have got out long-term injuries. Obviously, Zaha lost 18 of their last 23 Premier League matches without Zaha, which is just says absolutely everything, doesn't it? How important he is to what they do going forward. And it's a confidence thing as well. I think when you can see Zaha playing, obviously they've brought in, Mateta, and they've got Ayew, Benteke, Batshuayi. They've got options going forward, but I thought the defeat at Leeds for Palace last time out was disappointing. But they had come into that game, and they off the back of 2 straight wins, and it's left them up in 13th in the table at the moment. You're talking, 14 points above the bottom 3. They're not really going to push into the top half. I mean, they're 3 points off Leeds in 10th at the moment, so it's not, they could push into the top half, but I don't think they will, because I don't think they're quite good enough, and the absentees they've got, like I say, is just horrendous, and they don't seem to be getting many of them back, certainly within the next couple of months. So it's going to be that squad, I think, for Roy Hodgson. And yeah, it's a tight game. I didn't really want to go 1-1 again, because I'm sometimes a little bit guilty of going draws, but just thought, it's going to be a tight game. Not a lot in it. I think both managers will be okay with a point, and yeah, so I've gone for 1-1.
1-1, yeah, I've gone for that ever elusive 0-0 draw. I thought you might go the same. I think, Burnley's, as I mentioned, their attacking record away from home is pretty poor. Their attacking record in general is the worst in the league. 14 goals scored from 22 games this season. Crystal Palace have been finding the back of the net a little bit more regularly recently, but as you said, Zaha missing is just huge for them, as the stats prove that, their record without him and with him is a huge contrast. So I think him being absent will be a big thing for them and their attacking threat. As you say, they do still have attacking players who can make a difference. Easy's in there as well, among the players who can really make a difference and get a goal, a match-winning moment out of nothing, really. But yeah, I think this one's prime for one of those 0-0s we've been trying to get all season. I think this one could be a prime candidate for that. Looking at Palace's record this season, I think 2 points off Arsenal, they would have taken that certainly at this stage of the season. Obviously, Arsenal have woefully underperformed for much of the season. And level on points with Southampton, who have earned plenty of plaudits from us and others so far this season. So they're by no means doing too badly. 8 wins and 10 defeats is a pretty, even split for a team like them coming into the season. They might have been happy with that. And I think if you offered Roy Hodgson 14 points clear of the relegation zone at this stage of the season, he probably would have happily accepted that. So I think they're having an all right season, but yeah, they're sort of in that position here where is their ceiling of ambition at the moment? Can they push much higher? Probably not. If they ended the season in 13th place, it'd probably go down as just, a decent season for them, and they'd probably be pretty content with that. Burnley will want to climb a bit higher, but again, as we said, the gap to danger for them is pretty big at the moment, so they'd be relatively content, even though they've now gone 4 games without a win across all competitions. But yeah, I can see that one extending. We're both going for draws there, but I've gone for 0-0. Matt's gone for 1-1. Probably the standout fixture of the weekend comes on Saturday this time. Man City versus Tottenham. We mentioned Man City just looking more and more like champions elect at the moment. 5 points clear now with a game in hand. That game in hand is coming on Wednesday. We'll talk about that game in this podcast a little later as well. But now 15 wins in a row across all competitions, an all-time record. No English top flight has ever done that across all competitions, which is incredible, really. I think I mentioned earlier this season that, Man City, when they were dropping points earlier this season, they weren't the team they have been of the last 2 or 3 seasons, where they never looked capable of dropping points. Every drop point was a shock, and it's sort of getting back to that level now. They're getting back to the stage where you pretty much expect them to win every game. Defensively, as we've mentioned a few times, they're looking really solid. Going forward, even without De Bruyne and Aguero, they're keeping this attacking record going. Phil Foden was superb against Liverpool, obviously, and is really coming out of his shell at the moment. And you've got loads of other attacking players who are chomping at the bit to make a difference as well. The likes of Mahrez, Sterling, obviously, Ferran Torres, Bernardo Silva, Ilkay Gundogan, I think, is the top scoring Premier League player this calendar year, which is incredible, the difference he's made in the final third recently. So just got so many players willing to step up to the plate in the absence of probably their 2 biggest stars, certainly their 2 biggest attacking stars. So, they're only going to get stronger when those 2 come back. They face a Tottenham side in pretty poor form. That incredible 5-4 defeat after extra time against Everton in midweek. Crowd the pressure back on Mourinho a bit after easing it slightly with that 2-0 win over West Brom. But now 4 defeats in their last 5 games across all competitions, down in 8th place in the table. 4 points off the top four, so by no means out of that race. But this is as difficult a test as it gets in the Premier League at the moment to be facing Man City away from home. And as you know, Mourinho can get things out of these sorts of games by shutting up shop and maybe playing for a draw at times. Harry Kane being back for Tottenham ahead of schedule is a big thing for them, but it's impossible to back against Man City at the moment, really. And I've just gone for a 3-1 win for them in this one. I can see them coming out on top.
Yeah, I've gone 3-1 as well. Yeah,
Okay.
It's one of those games, and it sticks out. Yeah, obviously there's a few, injury doubts. I think ahead of the game for City, Rodri came off in the FA Cup game with a slight problem. Ruben Diaz missed out for illness, so they're two huge players that obviously with De Bruyne etc. who are already out, but they're two players that look like might be okay to come back in. I think Ruben Diaz, I know he made the mistake against Liverpool for the penalty incident, but for me he's been the best centre back in the league this season, and he's been, obviously Rodri is a very important player in the midfield as well, so if they can get those two players fit, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? You've mentioned 15 in a row now, and you go into each game and you're struggling. You're looking at the games ahead, City, and you're just thinking, where are they really going to drop points? I mean, they've got two tough games after this. Tough games, ever play Everton and Arsenal after this, which is also a tough game, but you just can't. They'll drop points somewhere. That the winning run won't continue, but it's just, like you say, it's very, very difficult because they're just so professional. They're just a machine really at the moment, aren't they? Just grinding out results after result, or win after win. And the win over Liverpool, obviously, as you mentioned, it was tight for long spells, but they came through in the end. Continue to move the ball, continue to cause problems. Were helped by a couple of really big mistakes. But as you mentioned, Phil Foden's been unbelievable recently. Really, really stepped up. And maybe the likes of Aguero being out and De Bruyne has helped him. Certainly helped him earn more minutes and take on a greater responsibility in the side. But yeah, the Tottenham. They're a strange team at the moment, aren't they? Tottenham, they're defensively, I just don't think they're good enough. Alderweireld's really gone off the boil. I thought he was one of the best defenders in the league for a little while. Sanchez, he scored twice against Everton, didn't he, FA Cup? But his defensive performances have not been great this season. Obviously, Harry Kane's been rushed back from. I say rushed back. Obviously, you fancy the injury he got was more of an impact. It wasn't really it was an impact. It wasn't a sprain or anything like that, because he would certainly be out for a lot longer. But they've got him back. They had to get him back against West Brom. Obviously, Son benefits when Kane's playing, but elsewhere, I just don't think the performances are really there at the moment. And contribution from elsewhere, where they're sitting down 8th at the moment. Tottenham, they're still very much in the race for the top 4 points off Liverpool with a game in hand. And I'm surprised they're that close to Liverpool, to be honest, considering Tottenham's recent form. As you say, they've been getting beat quite a lot, but so have Liverpool as well, to be fair. So they'll still feel they're in the argument. Looking at their games ahead, obviously Europa League, they play West Ham away as well in their next Premier League game after this one, which is going to be a huge game, because West Ham are going to be thinking, we deserve probably to finish above you this season. Obviously, they don't like each other, to put it politely. So that's a huge game. But yes, very, very difficult to back against City in this game. I think Tottenham will, as you say, I think they'll try to be a little bit tight, but they'll just give City too much of the ball. And I think City, with the ball, you can't kick them out at the moment, and it's very hard to score against them. So 3-1 City.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking back at Tottenham's previous form in the Premier League. The last time they won back-to-back games was when they beat Man City after beating West Brom. So they're looking to repeat that feat. But obviously, a lot has changed since then. Man City have just become this juggernaut, and Tottenham, since then, I'm just looking at it now, I've only won 4 games since then, when that was back in November. So, just Tottenham's form has sort of nosedived since that big win over Man City. Whereas Man City's form is only going on an upward trajectory, to the point where they're already getting touted as champions elect. It is only 5 points their lead at the top of the table, but just their form as well. They're looking imperious and very hard to stop at the moment. So both going for 3-1 Man City wins in that one. 8 p.m. on Saturday, we've got Brighton versus Aston Villa. Brighton knocked out of the FA Cup in midweek, but their Premier League form has been really good. Obviously, a draw at Burnley last time out slowed their momentum somewhat after back-to-back wins against Tottenham and Liverpool, but still in pretty good form. Aston Villa, that win over Arsenal last time out, they've been in pretty patchy Premier League form. But how do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's one that I think will hopefully be a good game. Two sides that like to get the ball down and play football, no doubt about that. Brighton, one of the best at doing that. Despite the fact they are 15th in the table, I've really pulled clear from any sort of really danger, haven't they? I still thought that maybe a few weeks ago they were in a bit of trouble because they were really struggling to win games, weren't they? And their home form this season, only 1 win. If you win 1 home game all season, it's very, very difficult. I think it's obviously, I think 16 of their 25 points have come on their travels this season, which is, I suppose it's not too surprising. It's one of those seasons, isn't it? It's like any other this season. So it's not, obviously, the absence of the fans and stuff like that. A lot of clubs, we've seen United struggle at home this season. A lot of teams have found it difficult because it's almost like there are no fans really. So you're just going and playing football. Obviously, the ground better and the pitch and the way it plays and stuff like that. But I don't think that's really too important this season. But Villa going into this game, the recent forms, like you say, has been quite patchy, isn't it? They went on a really good run. I think they've won 3 and lost 3 of their last 6 Premier League games. So that says a lot about where they sort of are, where they need to improve. Sitting down in 9th at the moment, 2 games in hand over a lot of the sides above them, at least 1 over everyone else apart from Everton in the league. So, they're only 5 points off the top 4, Villa. So, do I think Villa could finish Champions League? No, but do I think they could push to the top 7? Absolutely. I think they've, Ollie Watkins, was it 10 Premier League goals this season now for Watkins? Has been really good, hit the goal trail recently, as you mentioned, scored the winner against Arsenal last time out. And that was a big win. I think the win over Arsenal, just because Arsenal in and around them, it's a big club, Arsenal. I know they're struggling this season, but to go and have the confidence to go and win a game like that and keep a clean sheet, you don't expect there'll be many surprises in team selection in this game. I think Nakamba came in for Louise in the last game. You fancy Louise will come back in alongside McGinn, Grealish, Barkley, Traore behind Watkins. I don't think there'll be too many surprises there. Brighton, on the other hand, they've still got a few players out, and Lamptey's still out. A few, I think Webster and Davy Proper both doubts. Webster had an ankle injury. I think he's perhaps going to be okay. Davy Proper's been back in training. McAllister, Maupay, Veltman, Bissouma, they'll probably all come back in from the FA Cup game. So it'll be, a shuffle of the pack for Potter, and they'll feel they can go and hurt Villa. They really will. But I think the other hand, I think Villa will feel that they've got the players to harm them. And very, very tight game. But I think Brighton's home form just made me go with Villa here. I think Villa can be very dangerous on the road. So I've gone 2-1 Villa.
Yeah, I've gone exactly the same. I did go back and forth on this one. At first, I went for a draw. Brighton love a draw. 10 draws is the most in the league so far this season. But Aston Villa have only drawn twice this season. And recently, in particular, they've either been winning or losing games, which is probably down to their attacking style and going out to win games. And, if that opens them up a little bit at the back, which was probably the case in that recent Burnley loss, and maybe so in that West Ham loss as well recently. Aston Villa in general have been good away from home so far this season. More recently, probably not. They've only won 1 of their last 5 away Premier League games. That was last time out against Southampton. That solitary Brighton home win you mentioned did come in their last home game as well against Tottenham. That was their first home win in 15 Premier League games. So they have certainly struggled at the Amex so far this season. But they're in really good form to the extent where it wouldn't surprise me at all if they go and win this game or get a point out of this game. Aston Villa are in danger of falling into that clutch of teams where it's just really difficult to know if they're going to win or lose each week, because they're struggling to find a bit of a run of form, a bit of momentum, or a bit of consistency, either way, for good or bad at the moment. So Dean Smith would want his side to start finding a bit more regularity with their results. But he'll be delighted with how the season has gone so far, and rightly so. They've been really good, and as mentioned a few times, they've just got a clutch of really good players. Ollie Watkins obviously had a bit of a drought, but is back on the goal trail, as you said. Jack Grealish, Bertrand Traore, John McGinn, Ross Barkley. They've just got a lot of good players who can make the difference in pretty much any game. And I'll be backing some of them to do the same in this one. So yeah, both going for 2-1 Aston Villa wins in this one. Sunday, 12 p.m, we've got Southampton versus Wolves, the second meeting in 3 days between these two sides. After they played in the FA Cup, Southampton won that one 2-0 at Molineux, which was a big win for them after such a poor run before that, 4 defeats in a row before that. So they really needed to get back to winning ways in that game. A disappointing one for Wolves, though, after back-to-back decent results. 2-1 win over Arsenal and then a goalless draw against a high-flying Leicester side. So have got knocked out of the FA Cup. It's always disappointing for that sort of club who, silverware has been pretty few and far between recently, but they'd be desperate to get their hands on a trophy. That was their last chance really this season to get one. So they'll be really disappointed to go out on that one, but a big win for Southampton. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, we say it was a really big win, wasn't it, for Southampton? And the fact they drew Bournemouth in the next round, I know it's easy to say that, but it's a really good chance to reach a semi-final of the Cup. I think team selection for that game was interesting. Southampton went strong, didn't they, for the FA Cup game? I think Wolves were strong, but without playing, you talk about the players that didn't play that will play this game, Semedo, Patricio, Cody, Neto, Willian, Jose, Traore, they'll all come back into the side. It was a strong side from Wolves. It wasn't like it was a team of youngsters, but it wasn't the strongest side, which says that this game is more important to Wolves. Southampton, on the other hand, were, like I say, played a lot of their big players. Obviously, there was a couple of changes. Goalkeeper, centre back, you fancy will come back in, but so, and it's interesting that Southampton viewed that as so important when their league form recently. Southampton has been really poor, isn't it? They just can't seem to find any. Was it 4 defeats 5 in a row now? Actually, in the league, isn't it? Obviously, including that 9-0. Scored twice at Newcastle last time out. I think it was good, but to concede 3 at Newcastle, a Newcastle side that have had a lot of problems this season, is slightly worrying. And Southampton down in 12th position in the table now. They were really pushing, weren't they, for that top 6, top 7, and they're 29 points. They're now 10 points off West Ham in 6th at the moment. So I think if Southampton was to finish where they are, I do think that'd be a disappointment. Down in 12th. I think if they were to finish top 10, it'd be really good, taking everything into consideration. But to finish into the bottom half when they had been so good for stage of this season caused so many of the big teams problems, I think would be disappointing. Wolves, on the other hand, down in 14th at the moment, they're not going to finish, high up the table as they have done in their last 2 seasons. They're going to be, nowhere near the Europa League positions. They're battling really to, finish. I mean, only 4 points above Burnley in 17th, which is incredible. Really thinking about, could Wolves finish 17th this season? Maybe their form's been so poor. About the squad, manager's future's been called into, the fact that he might leave or something. But it's a big game. This one. This was a struggle, to be honest. I think looking at the recent performances between the two sides, 2 of the last 3 have been draws. There was a 0-0 back in the Championship in 2007 when they played. I've actually gone goalless here. I just think both sides will be really keen not to get beat. It will be tight. It'll be a different game to the FA Cup game, completely different. Certainly Wolves will be a different set of players, but tight game. Really difficult one to choose, this one. I was almost going to go goals, but I've just gone the opposite, to be honest. I've gone goalless.
Yeah, I jotted down some spot I thought might happen in this game before the FA Cup game last night, and originally I had this down as a 1-1. I thought it screamed out a 1-1 this one, but I think Southampton's win should just be really big for them mentally to get over that losing run. Again, if we go back all the way to their 9-0 against Leicester last season, it took a few weeks for them to really get over that, but then they started turning things around. And as we said, this 9-0 against Man United recently, they're in a much better position, much better foundation to build upon. And they'll be hoping that this victory over Wolves is, then the beginning of getting over that, having lost to Newcastle the week after the 9-0 defeat. So I think that victory will be huge for them in terms of their confidence and maybe getting a bit of momentum back. So I've just gone for Southampton 1-0 in this one. As you say, I am expecting a different game to the FA Cup game. We've seen it a few times this season where 2 teams have faced each other twice in really quick succession. And it's rarely, the second game is very rarely too similar to the first. There's usually a different scoreline, which again pushed me back towards a draw or 1-1. But yeah, I've just settled on Southampton in the end. Again, it is one that could go either way. And Southampton, as you mentioned, down in 12th place, we're still regarding them as a dangerous team because of their early form. But they are only 2 points above Wolves in the table now. Same goal difference as well. So if Wolves win this game, they go above Southampton in the table. But yeah, I think that win in midweek over Wolves at Molineux will prove to be an important moment in Southampton's season. As you say, their Premier League form is dire, but I think that's probably one of the reasons why they put such a strong team out in the FA Cup to get that win under their belts, because they know another defeat in that, getting knocked out of the FA Cup would have been pretty demoralising on the current run they're in. So yeah, I'm just going for Southampton 1-0 in this one. Also on Sunday at 2 p.m, we've got West Brom versus Manchester United. West Brom's situation's looking increasingly bleak now. 2 wins all season still. What is it now? 11 points to safety for them after their 2-0 defeat to Tottenham Hotspur last time out. Not too much of a surprise, that one, but nonetheless a disappointing result given that they need to start picking up wins if they're to survive now. Manchester United, speaking of disappointing results, looked on course for that win against Everton, didn't they? But that late Dominic Calvert-Lewin equaliser made it 3-3. Saw them drop 5 points off Man City's pace. But then they did pick up that extra time win over West Ham in the FA Cup in midweek to advance. Pretty poor game, but they picked up the victory in the end. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a must-win, isn't it, for United? Obviously, must-win for West Brom as well, but particularly United, looking at it from a United point of view, the Everton game was The most frustrating thing about it was the going forward in that game. United was so good, it's as good as I've seen them for ages. Going forward, Cavani was excellent, Fernandes, Greenwood, Rashford, they were all really, really good. And it did seem like, that crazy period after half time where Everton came back, and then I thought the goalkeeper should have done better for the McTominay header. But late on to, the conceding of the free kick was poor. The Wan-Bissaka jump and missing the ball was poor. Maguire playing everyone onside, De Gea not coming out and smothering the ball. There's lots of things you can look at in conceding that goal, and it was so disappointing that late. Obviously, I don't think United are going to win the league, but it's not about winning the league. It's about keeping hold of that second position, cementing your spot, keep that winning run going. And we're so disappointed. Obviously back to winning ways in the FA Cup, as you mentioned. I think you said poor game was probably being very kind. It's probably one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life. That game, it was pretty horrendous, to be honest. But to come through in the end, extra time goal, extra time ahead of this game is not ideal. But I mean, they had to bring on some of their big players, didn't they? I thought Van der Beek again. I think the thing with Van der Beek, he's clearly a talented player. He's clearly got lots of ability, but everything's too safe at the moment. He's so, I think, petrified of making a mistake and giving the ball away that he's not playing with confidence. There was that clip, wasn't there, of him, looking over to the sideline, knowing he's going to get taken off, and you have to feel for him because it's just not happening for him. I really hope it does. I think a lot of the United fans are really, majority, really, really hope it does work for him because, like I say, he's clearly a good player, but he's unfortunately competing for a position alongside, one of the best players in the league in Bruno Fernandes, and certainly United's most important player. So whether Van der Beek will eventually go back further back, he's good on the ball. Maybe he needs to become a bit more physical to play in the middle of the park, but he'll obviously be back on the bench for this game. Cavani will come back into the 11 you fancy. Obviously, strong team in the FA Cup, so there won't be that many changes. De Gea's interesting. I think De Gea will play, but Henderson was again solid against West Ham. De Gea's came into his performance against Everton wasn't great, and it's not the first time we've seen that over the last 12 to 18 months. So De Gea needs a big game in this game, but like I say, it's a really important game for United. Talking about where they are on the table, second, as we mentioned, the title's gone for me now. 5 points, City got a game in hand, but only 2 points above Leicester. The fact that Leicester play Liverpool is good for United because if that was a draw and United win, nice cushion that opens up. And I think the top four is the target for United this season. Top four, obviously, very, very interesting Europa League game coming up as well against Real Sociedad, who are... Sociedad's form has not been terrific recently in the league. They started the season brilliantly, but sitting, I think, they're sixth in the league at the moment. They're a very, very talented side. Potentially missing they will be missing their best player, Oyarzabal, against United. Certainly for the first leg, probably the second leg as well. But they're a very dangerous side. Obviously, that game takes place in Turin, doesn't it, and not in Spain. So that'll be interesting. Then United play Newcastle. Then the second leg against Sociedad. And then Chelsea at the end of the month. So it's a really big period for United. The squad will have to be utilised. Obviously, United's away form this season has been, as we know, terrific. The home form has been not good enough for a side that wants to challenge for the title. So, yeah, as you mentioned, West Brom, I just think, they are gone, aren't they, really? Talk about the gap. The amount of goals they've conceded this season, 54 goals in 23 games is... the game against Tottenham, I thought they were quite good against Tottenham for stages, but we always felt that Tottenham would come back and win. You're looking at their recent record against United. Early this season, it was only 1-0 at Old Trafford. Fernandes penalty, very tight game. I think it was back in March 2016 that West Brom beat United at the Hawthorns. I remember that game really well. Rondon got the winner, and it was a frustrating game for United. So they are capable of doing that, but I just think United, they'll be buoyed by that win over West Ham, and they need to win to as I say, stay in the race for second, third, fourth, whatever you want to say. So I think United will win this 2-0. Yeah,
I've actually gone 3-0 United. I think this is a pretty kind game for them. It'll be, as games go in the Premier League right now, it's probably as good a game as you could hope for, considering they've been better away from home than they have at home so far this season. And West Brom, obviously, the big thing about bringing Sam Allardyce in is to make them difficult to beat and, try and pick up enough points here and there to avoid relegation. That just hasn't happened. They haven't really looked difficult to beat at all. Obviously, they got that recent 2-2 draw with Fulham, but even that was at home against a relegation rival. They've been hoping for victory in that one, and they did pick up that win against Wolves last month. But just, that Tottenham game, they weren't difficult to beat, and that was pretty routine victory for Tottenham in that game. Tottenham did have to grind them down a little bit, but it was pretty routine for them in the end. Obviously losing to Sheffield United in their last league game before that as well, really disappointing result against another fellow struggler. I can't see them, picking up, even if the gap was only 5 points. I couldn't really see them picking up enough points to stay up. They don't look hard enough to beat, really. And with the gap at 11 points, I think unless they see an incredible turnaround in form under Allardyce, I don't really see them picking up the points. And I think, as I mentioned, I think this is a really good game for United. The one thing that was, making me a bit cautious about predicting a fairly big win for United is that recently their away form against these teams who are towards the bottom of the table, they've sort of only scraped the wins. Against Fulham, it was by 1 goal. Against Burnley, it was by 1 goal. Sheffield United by 1 goal. Even going back towards the start of the season, that Brighton game was by 1 goal. So they don't generally tend to blow those sorts of teams away from home. But I could say this West Brom side, they've been beaten fairly big scorelines by a couple of teams recently, like the Leeds, Arsenal, Man City, and Man United. Certainly got the capability to do that. If they attack like they did in the Everton game, then they could help themselves to more than 3 goals against a side like West Brom. Obviously, they'll be defending. They'll hope they'll be defending better than they did against Everton. But yeah, I can see United winning this one pretty comfortably. I think this one and probably their next one as well at home to Newcastle. The next 2 league games, Premier League games, I think are really kind for them to keep the pressure on. Certainly for that top 4 spot, as you say, probably Man City, as we both accept. I've got a bit of a gap at the top of the table, might keep everyone else at arm's length now. But, victories are key for United to keep hold of that Champions League spot. And I think if you had offered United a Champions League spot, certainly second place at the start of the season, they would have been pretty happy with that. So, yeah, I can see a pretty comfortable win for Man United here. I've gone for 3-0. We've got Arsenal versus Leeds also on Sunday. Very interesting game, this one. Arsenal's resurgence seemed to have slowed a little bit recently. The back-to-back defeats against Wolves, obviously that one was with 9 men eventually, so they won't be looking too much into that one. But then last time out against Aston Villa, the 1-0 defeat was really disappointing. Mikel Arteta felt his side deserved more from that, but ultimately they came away with nothing. Leeds, as we've mentioned countless times on this, are just one of those teams which is difficult to call, but 3 wins from their last 4 league games is certainly an improvement. They're now above Arsenal in the Premier League table, into the top half, having played a game fewer. 10 wins and 10 defeats pretty much sums up Leeds this season and how difficult they are to call. So this really could be anything. It's certainly one I went back and forth on. Arsenal's, as we mentioned, their form has slowed with those back-to-back defeats, and before that, a goalless draw with Manchester United. Prior to that, they had been in really good form. But yeah, this is a game I would not really be surprised at any result whatsoever. But after going back and forth, I've eventually landed on an Arsenal win, and even saying it, I'm not too confident. But I think I'm going for an Arsenal win 2-1 in this one.
Exactly the same, yeah, and for exactly the same reasons, yeah. Exactly what you said is exactly what I was going to say. Just I'm quite uncomfortable going for it because I was just thinking, can I change my mind? But I don't like. I've gone a few draws again, so yeah, really difficult. Exactly what you said. I've gone 2-1 Arsenal, but not feeling a little bit, strange about it because it is very difficult. But as you say, Leeds, they're more than capable of getting beat as they are of going and winning games. It's actually going to be the first Premier League game between these two sides in London since 2004, which is obviously Leeds have been away for so long. Thierry Henry got 4 in that day. Arsenal won 5-0. Pires on the score sheet. Looking through the Leeds side in that game, Milner, Pennant, Smith, Viduka, all these players that they had. It's going to be a different game. Obviously, they played earlier this season at Ellen Road, and that was goalless. And Leeds really should have won that game. Remember that they hit the bar a few times, didn't they? And Arsenal were very, very fortunate to get away with taking a point from that game. But as you mentioned, Leeds above Arsenal in the table, and it's just incredible, really, isn't it? As you mentioned, with the game in hand, and 3 of the last 4 Leeds win over Palace was a nice, solid performance, and can manage to keep Palace out the other end. But Everton, Arsenal, they're going to be missing Tierney's injured again. Thomas Partey, who's really struggling for fitness at the moment, he's going to be out again. Obviously, Bernd Leno and David Luiz will be back. They were suspended, weren't they, for the clash against Villa last time out, which was really disappointing for Arsenal. They huffed and puffed, and they had lots of little periods in the game, but Villa came through and won the game, and that put Villa 4 points above Arsenal. And the fact that Arsenal competing with Leeds, Villa at the moment, I mean, as you mentioned, they're only 2 points above Southampton, as you just alluded to, and Southampton's got a game in hand. Talking about Southampton dropping off Arsenal, I mean, can they get away with a finish? I know Arsenal are a team in transition, but can they really get away with finishing 12th or something this season? I don't think they can. You can't finish down in 12th. Like, I know last season was transition, obviously new manager, new players, but Arsenal's squad is good enough to, finish, top half. It's not good enough to make the top 6, nowhere near, in my opinion. Leicester, teams like that are way above Arsenal in terms of quality. And talking about the normal top 4, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City, even arguably Everton, they're all better than Arsenal. So this is a really big one. It's exactly the same. I don't want to go over the same reasons you've said. It's tight. Arsenal's form, I've just gone with them because Leeds can, like you say, they're more than capable of losing and winning games, and it's very, very tough. But yeah, 2-1 Arsenal.
Yeah, just looking back, Leeds' last away game was obviously that 3-1 win against Leicester as well, which proves that they can beat these teams. So who knows what this is going to be. But yeah, we'll both somehow come to the same agreement on that one, that Arsenal are going to win that one 2-1. Wouldn't be surprised either way in that one. Rounding off the action on Sunday is Everton versus Fulham. Fulham in 18th place, 8 points from safety after another draw last time out. They're picking up draws with regularity, but they need to start turning those into victories. It was against West Ham, their draw last time out, which made it 3 draws in their last 4 games, and going back, they've drawn an awful lot of games in the Premier League recently. Everton, it would have taken it out of them, no doubt, with that FA Cup game, but what a game that was. 5-4 against Tottenham after extra time, swung both ways. After the 3-3 draw against Manchester United before that, so they've been involved in a lot of entertaining action recently, Everton, and they beat Leeds before that, so with 3 pretty good results. That Manchester United one obviously dropped points, but that would have felt like a victory the way that equalising goal came so late on. 7th in the table. They were pretty confident going into this game. Obviously, there's question marks over Dominic Calvert-Lewin's fitness, which will be big for them after he got taken off in midweek. But how do you see this one going? It's an interesting clash, isn't it?
Yeah, it is one. I've gone Everton here 2-0. I think Everton. I think I said it a few times, even when they were inconsistent and playing, picking up some poor results there this season. I just think there is something really positive about Everton at the moment. They've obviously got a top draw manager. They've got a really good group of players. I think they still need to add, and I think they will this summer. Obviously, hopefully, the world has gone a lot more normal than it is now, and next season we'll get back to regularity. And I think this summer's transfer window will be, obviously January was very quiet, wasn't it, for across the globe really in terms of top level football. But I think there will be moves this summer. And I think Everton top 6. You mentioned 7th in the table. 2 games in hand, haven't they, on the lot? Obviously, one of those is against Manchester City, so that's very tough. But 3 points behind Liverpool. Obviously, they play Liverpool very soon, don't they? So I think as you mentioned, the draw against United will have felt like a win. They were really poor in the first half of that game, really, really poor, but came back in the second half and, as you say, got a point, and obviously a topsy-turvy FA Cup clash with Tottenham, which was a terrific game to watch, and one that showed, I think, obviously Everton, like I say, their weaknesses have definitely got them, but they've definitely got some strengths as well. Richarlison getting a couple of goals was big for him because his Premier League form's not been terrific recently. I think he needs to have more. As you mentioned, Calvert-Lewin's fitness is obviously hugely important to what Everton are trying to do. But yeah, Fulham, they just need to win games, don't they? The West Ham game was obviously marked by that late red card for Soucek, which was the main talking point. Apart from that, wasn't really much else happening in the game. There was a few half chances for either sides. Disappointing. You talk about where Fulham are on the table. You can't win 2 Premier League games from 22 and expect to be in a position where you're going to potentially stay up. As you mentioned, the gap's 8 points now. They can't keep drawing because Burnley will pick up a win and then you pick up a point. You're losing 2 points every time, so it's just not going to work. They're not going to stay up unless they win. You talk about what they need to win, maybe 4 or 5 more games. I'm not sure. Probably more than that, to be honest. 5, 6, 7, 8 more games. But it's very, very difficult to see him staying up from this stage, and very difficult to see him getting a result here. So I've gone 2-0 Everton.
Yeah, Fulham got a really big run coming up. They've got Burnley, Sheffield United and Crystal Palace in the next 3 after this. As you say, I've also gone for 2-0, exactly the same as you in this one. I can see it being a really tough game for them. I was close to going, 1-0 Everton, or them just scraping it by 1 goal, because Fulham have been difficult to beat. As those draws show, they have been difficult to beat in recent times. But Everton, the recent goal show, they've been on 8 goals in their last 2, 10 goals in their last 3. Obviously, Calvert-Lewin is a big part of that, and obviously if he misses, that will limit Everton's goal threat a bit. They're starting to find certainly their goal scoring groove, and when you consider Fulham, haven't been scoring goals freely themselves whatsoever. I think it's 4 of the last 5 games across all competitions they failed to find the back of the net in. So while Fulham have been difficult to beat, obviously the flip side of that is they've found it really difficult to win, even more difficult to win than they've been difficult to beat. So that's the balance they need to strike and need to find. And they're really running out of time. I don't see them getting it here. Their next 3 games are probably where we'll learn the most about their survival hopes and if they've got any chance of bridging that gap. But it's looking increasingly bleak for them. And yeah, we're both going for Everton to win 2-0 in that one. On Monday night, we've got a double header, West Ham versus Sheffield United. Sheffield United, another of those teams down there at the bottom of the table. probably in the better form out of those 3 teams in the relegation zone, but probably left it too little, too late. They're 12 points from safety, still at the bottom of the pile. Did go through in the FA Cup in midweek with that win over Bristol City, bouncing back from the defeat to Chelsea in the Premier League last weekend. West Ham, by contrast, went out of the FA Cup in that game we mentioned against Man United last time out, drew with Fulham in that game we just mentioned last time out in the Premier League. But still 6th in the table, still only 1 point off the top 4. Still a really good season for them, and they'll be confident going into this game against Sheffield United. Sheffield United have picked up some good results recently, but, time is running out, and pretty much every game now is a must-win for them. And when you're coming up against the West Ham side, who have enjoyed such good form so far in the league this season, been a little bit patchy recently, but in general, they'll be pretty happy with their form. And knowing victory will keep them in the top 4 race, I can just see West Ham coming out on top of this one. The temptation is always pretty much to go for a 1-0 win when you're anyone's facing Sheffield United, because they've lost by that scoreline. But Sheffield United very rarely lose by more than 1 goal, and more recently it's been 2-1 because they've been starting to find a few more goals. So that's the scoreline I've gone for this one, 2-1 to West Ham.
2-1, yeah, I've gone for what you mentioned, 1-0 West Ham in this game. Yeah, I just think if Sheffield United are going to have any chance of staying up, and this is any chance, I think they need to win the next 2, don't they? West Ham, Fulham, and they play Liverpool. But if they were to pick up 6 points in the next 2, they give themselves a chance. I don't think there is a chance at the moment, but very difficult to go to West Ham and win. West Ham Cup game, like I say, that was a horrendous game from both sides of the FA Cup game, and obviously Antonio not playing in that game took away from West Ham, and it's another indication of the fact that I'm staggered they didn't sign a striker in January. I know Josh King went to Everton, but he was an option. Talk about elsewhere, even someone like Josh Madger, who Fulham signed on loan. Someone like that, another body, another option in the final third for West Ham, because when Antonio doesn't play, Yarmolenko's not good enough to play there. He's not mobile enough and struggling elsewhere in that game. So yeah, it's a really big game for West Ham. I think the fact that teams below West Ham now are starting to find some form. Obviously, Chelsea have gone above them now. Villa are right in the argument. Everton are playing well. Tottenham are still very much in that shout as well. And West Ham just need to be careful that they don't, because they pick up a couple of poor results and they could slide down to 9th or something, and then you're really struggling to finish in the. Don't get me wrong, I think top 10 this season would be terrific for West Ham, but I know that European, they might not get a better chance than this to finish top 7, which would potentially bring a Europa League spot. It's a really good opportunity for West Ham this season, but obviously old Bonner getting injured in that game, their best defender, someone who's been one of the most consistent defenders in the game this season, picked up that ankle injury, didn't he, at Old Trafford, and facing a spell out. Obviously Souček's red card getting rescinded is a huge positive, but they really need to beat Sheffield United, like I say, during a stage where teams are going to win this weekend. A lot of teams, Chelsea, if fancy, will beat Newcastle. Liverpool looking to win Leicester. They'll go further clear. Villa will be looking to win. Tottenham obviously play City, tough game, but they could really find themselves falling down if they were to pick up, like I say, a couple of bad results. So, FA Cup disappointment, but the Premier League is more important. Next 2 in the Premier League after this one for West Ham, Tottenham and Manchester City. So, like I say, that makes this even more important. And I think Sheffield United, let's say, have improved. They've got a lot going for them at the moment. FA Cup, they're playing a lot better than they were earlier this season, but I don't think they'll get anything here. Gone 1-0 West Ham.
1-0 West Ham for Matt in that one. Okay, rounding off the game week, we are going to cover the Wednesday's games in hand, but rounding off this game week is Chelsea versus Newcastle. Chelsea still unbeaten under the new manager, Thomas Tuchel. Beat Barnsley, scraped past Barnsley, really. Wasn't convincing, particularly in the FA Cup in midweek, but did get through, won that game, made it 4 wins in a row and 5 games without defeat under the new manager. Newcastle beat Southampton. Really big victory for them, that one. Not just the manner of the 3 points, but the way in which they held on with 9 men in the end, having had a man sent off and then another man taken off with injury, having used all subs to hold out for victory when Southampton were really knocking on the door. Showed great character, which is perhaps something which has been accused as being lacking at Newcastle at times this season and at times in the past. It showed really good character to hang on and resist the pressure for that one. So that was a huge victory for them. Obviously, the 3 points takes them 10 points clear of the relegation zone, which is the big thing. But I think, as I say, the manner in which it happened will be big for them and big for Steve Bruce. Having said that, go into a couple of really difficult games against Chelsea and Manchester United, both away from home here. So Key will be backing that up, but that's a lot easier said than done against the Chelsea side in, as I mentioned, really good form under their new manager. It's difficult. Chelsea's defensive record has improved, obviously, big time with Thomas Tuchel coming in as well. So it's difficult to even see Newcastle scoring in this game. They've had their troubles with Callum Wilson now out for 6 to 8 weeks. That's huge for them. We've mentioned a few times he's missed a bit of time through injury this season, and when he's out, Newcastle do really tend to struggle to score goals. And in fairness to Newcastle, they've obviously got a lot of stick this season for a lot of their form, but it's been pretty rare when they've had their full attacking outfit out on the team and, fit and firing when you consider St. Maximin's been out for a long time with the effects of coronavirus as well. So you do have to take that into account when talking about Newcastle's form, but the fact are that they won't be with Callum Wilson in the side for this one, and that has a big impact on the team. So I can't really see them scoring in this one. Chelsea still aren't really clicking in the final third under the new manager. A lot of their players not in the best form. Obviously, Timo Werner's the standout one, but a few others need to start offering a bit more in terms of goals and assists in the final third. But they are still doing enough to win games, and I've gone for a 2-0 Chelsea winning this one.
Yes, I've also gone 2-0 in this game. As you mentioned, they really did scrape past Barnsley, didn't they? Barnsley were really good, had some big chances in that game, but Chelsea managed to progress to the quarterfinals where they will face got Sheff Utd, haven't they? And they play Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, which is going to be really, really tough. Atletico's side that are top of the league and have been very, very, very impressive this season. So that's a really tough game for them, or tough two-legged game. They play Manchester United at the end of the month as well. They've got next two in the league, Newcastle, Southampton. They'll fancy their chances of winning, but as you mentioned, this, relying on a really strong defence, I don't think that can go on. I think they will need to have players offering, as you say, much more in the final third. Werner missed out, Havertz missed out, Barnsley. They'd probably both be okay for this game if they want to come. If Tuchel wants to put them back into the side, Ziyech has not been great, as Pulisic is not quite hitting his form at the moment, and they've got a lot of players, a lot of options going forward, but need to find that right sort of recipe at the moment. But as you mentioned, 4 wins in a row, all competitions, up to 5th now in the league, a point behind Liverpool, and right in the top 4 race, aren't they? We're doing a stage where they had really fallen down and they looked like they might even struggle to finish, top 6. So they'll obviously be desperate to win again, because they'll probably have, dropped down a few places maybe because they play, as you say, on Monday rather than Saturday or Sunday. So big game for them. As you mentioned, Newcastle, I think the fact that, as you say, Callum Wilson being out is huge, but St. Maximum, as you said, I think came out with 2 assists, didn't he, of the win over Newcastle, assisted Willock and Almiron's first goal. So huge player for them. To have him back is obviously hugely impressive. And as you mentioned, 2 out of their last 3 wins has moved them clear. So very important as well, as you say, ahead of back-to-back games of Chelsea and Manchester United, which is always going to be tough. So, yeah, I don't think they'll get much change out of Chelsea. Chelsea are much improved under Tuchel, and I think they'll win this 2-0 Chelsea.
Yeah, I think Chelsea are probably the epitome of what we've been talking about a lot of the season, about how a good run of form can get you right back up there, and a bad run of form, because they were touted as title contenders earlier in the season, then dropped down to mid-table, now 1 point off the top 4. So very much in the conversation. Okay, that rounds up that game week, but for Wednesday, we've got 2 games in how much we're going to cover. The first of those is Burnley versus Fulham. Obviously, we're talking about these before we know the weekend results of them, and we've already talked about the teams in a relative degree of depth. But yeah, Fulham, as we say, need to pick up wins rather than draws against Burnley. They might fancy their chances of doing so, more so than in their first game of the weekend, away to Everton. So this is a big game for them towards the bottom of the table. Obviously, as we speak, it's 17th versus 18th. 8 points is the gap, and you'd probably class this, as you mentioned earlier, as a must-win game for Fulham, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think that they absolutely have to win this game, don't they? Fulham, even a point wouldn't be good enough, because that gap, as you say, is what it is at the moment. Obviously, as you say, it could change by the time it goes into this game, but it is one that just have to win. They played the FA Cup, didn't they, early this season? Early this season, last month, wasn't it? January, Burnley won 3-0. Early season at Turf Moor, Burnley won 2-1, but Fulham have only won 1 of the last 5 between the 2 teams in all competitions. So it's not great. And the fact that Fulham, as we say, have won twice this season in the Premier League, they find it so difficult, don't they, to win games. And the fact they draw so many shows that they're almost there, in terms of, but I suppose that can work both ways. You need to manage to get that balance of turning draws into wins, which is, arguably the most difficult step to do, because they don't seem to have that confidence to really go for it when they need to. They're just trying to, desperate not to get beat. We saw some of the defending from Fulham earlier this season was horrendous, wasn't it? But they've improved certainly on that. I think their goal record this season is You talk about how many they've conceded this season. 31 goals is actually really good, isn't it? In terms of where they are in the table, that they have been difficult to score against, and West Brom 54. So Fulham, Burnley, sorry, on the other hand, as you mentioned, come in, they've lost on the FA Cup, lost 3 of the last 4. Obviously, face a tough game against Palace, don't they, before this? So 2 tough games for Burnley. If they were to lose them both, maybe that gap would become a little bit more difficult, wouldn't it? That's quite nice at the moment. But yeah, I've just gone 0-0 here. I think Fulham, they draw so many. Burnley do, like a draw. They drew their last Premier League game at home, didn't they, against Brighton? I think it'll be a similar game, to be honest. I've gone 0-0.
Yeah, I thought you might go for that. I've gone exactly the same. Obviously, I went for 0-0 in the Crystal Palace one as well. So I can see back-to-back 0-0s for Burnley, but this is just a game which screams out, doesn't it? I think on Fulham, I think, yeah, you make a good point about earlier in the season, their defending was just awful. And even after 3, 4, 5 games of the season, people were saying, including us, to be fair, that they're down and they're doomed and they won't have any chance of staying up. So I think when you take their season into account, you've got to recognise that there's been definite improvement there. They've made themselves harder to beat. They're conceding much fewer goals. Only conceded 1 more goal than second place Manchester United. So they've made themselves a lot harder to beat. It's just that next step, turning those draws into victories, that they're really struggling with at the moment. And obviously, that's a lot easier said than done in the Premier League. That's, a massive thing in the Premier League. Every Premier League win is very hard fought and difficult to get. But that's the next step they need to do if they are to stay up. And if they are to stand any chance of staying up, I think they probably need a victory here. Obviously, that depends on how the weekends go. As you say, if Crystal Palace go and beat Burnley, Fulham go and manage to pick up a win against Everton, and then manage to win against Burnley themselves, then that gap suddenly is cut right down to 2 points. So that it could be a huge couple of games for Fulham. But, that would be flying in the face of recent form, really. So Fulham need to turn something around, and this game against Burnley looks like the perfect chance to do it. We mentioned Everton in action in their first game against Fulham. They are again in action against Manchester City on Wednesday at 8:15 p.m. Obviously, we've mentioned Everton's recent goal-scoring exploits and Manchester City's recent winning exploits. Absolute winning machine. I think I said during the prediction for the Tottenham game that it's impossible to back against Man City at the moment, but I've actually done that in this game. I can see Everton getting something out of this game. I've gone for a 1-1 draw. I think Everton have proven to be pretty difficult customers for Man City in recent times. They've taken the odd point off them, and I think their record against big teams recently, obviously a 5-4 win against Tottenham, the 3-3 draw against Manchester United. They drew against Leicester, who are in really good form recently, beaten Arsenal, beat Leicester earlier in the season, beat Chelsea earlier in the season. They've obviously got the manager who knows about these big games, knows how to get victories in big games against really good teams. And I can just see them doing that here. As you mentioned earlier, that Man City's winning run can't go on forever. It's been magnificent, and they'd go into pretty much every game now as favourites. Going to Anfield and winning 4-1 for the first time in 17 years, a victory at Anfield is huge for them. That's probably their only remaining bogey ground in the country. So they'll now go into every single game as favourites and firmly believing they can win it. But I can just see, my gut's telling me Everton might get something out of this one. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens with Everton against Fulham and with Man City against Tottenham. But I just can see Everton ending Man City's winning run here. I've gone for 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I'm almost going to contradict myself now, because I said earlier I couldn't really see where City were dropping points, and I did just change it up. I had 2-2. I just went 2-1 City, but I'm going to stick with 2-2 because you'd always stick, shouldn't you? What you go, it's probably, City's defensive record this season and recently has been terrific. So to back them to concede twice is probably going against it a bit. But as you mentioned, Everton are a very, very dangerous side and full of goals at the moment. You mentioned 5 in the FA Cup, 3 against United at Old Trafford. And I think City will hurt Everton going forward, because defensively I still think you can really get at Everton. But really good going forward. As you mentioned, Ancelotti knows these type of games. Ancelotti against Guardiola is an interesting matchup. And it's one that I almost went City, but and I changed it, and I've maybe changed my mind again. But I will just stick with 2-2, as you mentioned. It's difficult to talk about, isn't it, ahead of games that haven't been played. But if Everton was to beat Fulham, they then go into a really tough doubleheader, don't they, against City and Liverpool, and maybe we'll find out where Everton are going to finish this season, maybe how they got in those games, because they could, even 2 draws would be really good because they'd be stopping the other side from winning and obviously picking up points against 2 really big sides. So really, really big period for Everton. Obviously FA Cup as well, they've got to look forward to as well. But we'll be really keen to push into that. Well, they're 7th at the moment, but they'll feel that they should be above West Ham and Chelsea as well, who, you know, maybe will hit a sticky patch at some point under Tuchel if their attacking players don't start firing. So, yeah, it's a really, really interesting game. Tight one to predict, but I've gone 2-2.
2 all, both going for draws in that one, so both going for Man City's winning run to end. All right, thank you, Matt. We will be back again next week for our next round of predictions. In the meantime, you can find all of these games and previews for them over on sportsmile.co.uk. We've also got previews for many more games across the Championship, across Europe and elsewhere. So please tune into sportsmile.co.uk to find them. You can subscribe to this podcast on all the usual channels, and you can subscribe on YouTube to make sure you don't miss a single episode. But until then, we'll see you next week.